I mean, he is the personification of energy. I mean, the dude just simply never stops. He just keeps right on going. We're going to take a look here at the old YouTube real quick.
I think we might be on.
Let's see.
Yeah.
We are working. We are live.
Woohoo! Woohoo! All right, keep reading. I have a few things to do here.
Nope, you're good. Technical glitches abound. Hey, listen, y'all get to hear me with this southern drawl, and I ain't looking at chat right now because I'm reading, and I'm let y'all know how inconsiderate Ted is. As a southerner, I obviously don't know how to read, and Ted did not put any cartoons on this, so I'm having to just go through and trying to figure out this thing called English. That's a joke, by the way.
Yeah, you're a northerner now. You don't have that excuse anymore.
Northwesterner. Westerner? Well, Montana was actually very sympathetic to the Confederacy back in the war between the states.
Yeah, Montana's not the Pacific Northwest, right? Isn't it Northern Plains, if I'm not mistaken?
It's kind of like Texas. It's a little bit of everything. So it's plains, mountains. It's just big.
Yeah, it's got Rockies. It's got all that stuff.
All the things. So Carolyn Kennedy wrote a scathing letter to key senators on Tuesday, calling her cousin, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a predator. That's fancy coming from her. Addicted to attention from airing dangerous views on vaccinations, and someone who is unfit for the nation's health secretary. She urged lawmakers who will be questioning Mr. Kennedy at his confirmation hearings Wednesday and Thursday to reject his nomination. She cited his lack of experience, misinformed views on vaccines, like sometimes it makes you sick, and personal attributes. Now, for my YouTube committee guidelines, I want to say right now, everyone knows that vaccines are safe and effective. We know that they work exactly as advertised, and you don't need to test them. Just take the government's word for it. We know this is true. So since
all
it's on
good
YouTube,
all the time.
I got you. I got y'all on this. I'm doing your job for you. I'm doing the job that censors don't want to do. In the letter, she described how he led other family members down the path of drug addiction. Right, because Kennedy's never had problems with that.
Yeah, they needed RFK to do that.
Yeah, help him get sober, maybe. His basement, his garage, and his dorm room were the centers of action where drugs were available, and he enjoyed showing off how he put baby chickens and mice in the blender to feed his hogs. Miss Kennedy wrote. She's like, what is this?
He's an interesting man.
100%. Well, I used to back home. I used to walk down the road shooting squirrels, take them home and cook them and eat them.
I mean, now, when you're up for a cabinet post, that could get you into trouble.
Hey, squirrel's a fine meal. It's worth it. It was often perverse scene of despair and violence. Miss Kennedy expressed particular outrage over the new disclosures in his ethics agreement filed with the Senate, when she described as outlining how his crusade against vaccination has benefited him in other ways. She cited Mr. Kennedy's decision to keep a financial stake in litigation against Merck, which makes a key vaccine against the human poliovirus, whatever the hell that is.
Papilloma virus.
I told you I need them cartoons.
That's genital warts for us old people.
Oh, that sounds lovely. HPV that is administered to protect against cervical cancer. Sorry, not ovarian cancer. I told y'all I can't read. It's hard. In other words,
I'll get you with the next story, but you should wrap this one up.
Not working on it. In other words, he's willing to enrich himself by denying access to vaccines that can prevent almost all forms of cervical cancer, which has been safely administered to millions of boys and girls. Now, why in the hell would you give cervical cancer vaccine to boys? Boys don't have cervix. I don't understand this.
Well, apparently cervical cancer can, I did look into this because I do have a boy. And basically, if a boy will obviously not get it himself, but he can pass it along. So let's say he has a girlfriend A, he gets it from girlfriend A, and then he gives it to girlfriend B, and then she gets it, and then it carries an increased risk of cervical cancer if she gets HPV. So it's kind of like to be a good member of the community and reduce the spread. Remember that from COVID? It's about that.
Gotcha. That just confused the hell out of me. It's kind of like getting ovarian cancer as a dude. It's
it's like the tampons in the bathroom.
Exactly.
Well, the tampons in the bathroom is also, I think, obviously like you grab some for your menstruating girlfriend. Like, hey, happy Valentine's Day. Here you
Yeah.
go.
Or plug a bullet hole.
Instead of flowers.
As President Joseph R. Biden Jr.'s ambassador to Australia, Miss Kennedy was actively involved in promoting the HPV vaccine, which has put Australia on the path to eliminate cervical cancer. She was instrumental in persuading Mr. Biden to expand his cancer moonshot initiatives to the Indo Pacific region, as opposed to, like, say, poor places here in America. In her role as ambassador, Miss Kennedy said she is reluctant to make public comments against Mr. Kennedy,
Not
who
reluctant
launched
enough.
no, woman. I mean, her mouth is like a motor, just always just running. Who launched his presidential campaign in 2023 as a primary challenge to Mr. Biden before running as an independent candidate. And why did he do that? Ted, could you remind us why he did that?
Well,
Why did he run as an independent?
because the Democratic Party wouldn't let him run as a Democratic challenger to Joe Biden.
Shocking, right? When Mr. Kennedy dropped his presidential bid, he endorsed Mr. Trump, who, after winning the election, named Mr. Kennedy as his choice for health secretary. After that, she broke with her cousin, saying his views about vaccination are dangerous.
Now that we're live and everything, I have to say I have thoughts about this. I have opinions. So Carolyn Kennedy is certainly, like all of us, entitled to her opinions, but I do have a very dim view of people who are disloyal to their own family members. And whatever you think of RFK Jr., he's a deeply flawed person who has worked really hard to get better, right? I mean, the stuff that she talked about, by her own admission, he is now clean and sober and has been for many years. He no longer participates. He doesn't use drugs. To my knowledge, he doesn't drink alcohol. Patrick Kennedy, Patrick Kennedy's his young nephew, wrote a letter to the editor in the Washington Post that I think is published today, where he said, "Look, it was actually RFK who got me into a sobriety 12-step program," and like so, if a person screws up and then this isn't like Pete Hegseth, who still drinks, right?
Right.
And still is the same person. He hasn't changed his behavior. But if you reform yourself, in my view, these old things should not be held against you. And then also, I take a really dim view of the fact that basically what is her brief against RFK? She doesn't like the fact that he's been skeptical of vaccines. But look, as you know, I was once the most vaccinated man in America. I even got like illegal COVID vaccines. Okay. So I'm not an anti-vaxxer by any means, right? But I'm anti-vax mandates. But so is RFK. He was against mandates too. And really what this comes down to is his opposition to mandates and his statements that no vaccine is 100.0% safe and effective. Well, that's true. That's science. Now you can argue and say, like, okay, well, if like the COVID vaccine has killed maybe, I don't know, a few people, right? Out of millions and millions of people. And so the thing is, it is safe and effective. Hello, YouTube. It is, but RFK is basically saying, like, we don't need to, you can't say scientifically that no vaccine is risk-free. Well, that's true. Overall, it's a good thing. But, and so anyway, I think his position has been misconstrued by her, but also what really bugs me about what she had to say was what she left out. I mean, we were talking right before we went on the air, Robbie, or trying to go on the air, that there was that he's the one Trump cabinet official who might actually be able to improve all of our lives, might even be able to save a bunch of lives, maybe hundreds of thousands, even millions of lives through his initiatives about diet. And if you get a guy like Donald Trump, famous for his, let's just say, non-vegan diet, to get on board with making America healthy again and getting us to eat better and get the toxins out of our food supply and take on big food, I'm all for it. I mean, he's the only one I really want to see nominated for that reason alone. And she doesn't even address that. Or the fact that he was an environmental lawyer for many, many years, who really helped go after big polluters. And yeah, he made money doing it. I mean, so sue him. It's America. There's capitalism. But I mean, I don't know. I don't think, whatever you think of Carolyn Kennedy, that what she did, she's being like, praised for being courageous. There's nothing courageous about going after a guy who's already viewed as fringe by the mainstream media. and whose chances of nomination are less than 50%, and going after your own cousin, who, by your own account, you don't really know that well and you haven't talked to for a long time. Cousin. It's like
Right.
a cousin. If one of none of my cousins know me very well. If one of my cousins were to come out on some rant on Facebook, Facebook video, the way that she did yesterday, I don't know, anything they say would be like pretty watered down. They don't really know me. I don't know. So the whole thing, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth, and I don't like it. I mean, I think family loyalty and loyalty in general are super important. She should have zipped it. That's my opinion.
Well, it's pathetic, right? Because one, I mean, if you're going to go after somebody for not being perfect, hey, hello, I ain't perfect. I mean,
100% here.
we're all flawed. We all screw up. We've all made mistakes. There's only one person who never did. Now, I know that some people disagree with that, but as a Christian,
The
there's
big
like,
guy?
yeah, Jesus himself. He's the
Well,
only one that
Jesus.
didn't
No,
screw up.
Jesus made mistakes. He said by his own account.
Now, I disagree with you on there, but the point is like he didn't sin. Is where I'm going with this. So, I mean, everyone makes mistakes.
We could have a theological discussion about that.
Oh, 100%. I'd love to have it because I want to convert you to Christianity. I don't know if I can, but I want
Well,
to do it.
I did grow up Catholic, so it's not like it's impossible, and I still
Hey,
have those values, obviously.
oh
I
yeah,
mean,
but I guess I'm. It's weird, man, because I mean she's going to go after him for drug use. Show me one rich
not
family.
ongoing drug use. I
Yeah,
mean,
because
I'm
well, it's in the
sorry. It's
past.
like, like what a fucking hard ass she is, right? I mean, it's like, so he was 15 years ago, he was a degenerate like Hunter Biden. Well,
He turned
now
his life around.
he's clean and sober, which
Yeah,
is insanely hard work. He's better now. What the fuck more does she want?
I think really all this is that she's punching down.
Yeah,
She's punching down. It's just I think it's
that's
just
what
that
it is.
elitist. It's that elitist attitude where you say, you're not towing the family line. You're actually admitting that there are problems, and you mean you're actually going to look out for those plebs? Like you care about people getting sick? I mean, what the hell's wrong with you? Who cares about them? Who cares about those? Who cares about those people in Gary in Gary, Indiana? I don't. So and he does. I think that's
Yeah,
what it is.
he does. And I mean, I think he himself would certainly say that he's not perfect. But, I mean, look, it's like, I don't know. To me, it says a lot that his wife, Cheryl Hines, stuck with him. She's extremely desirable. She could get remarried in 5 seconds flat. It's obviously she sees something in him. I don't know. It's just, she's cute as a button. What the hell? I don't know. I don't
No,
get it.
I don't know.
So she, so yeah, I mean, and Carolyn Kennedy. Okay, whatever. Okay, let's move on.
She's a,
Almost,
she's a pill.
she's a pill. Almost 5 years have passed since COVID-19 first disrupted the school system. New data, known as the nation's report card, offers a mixed bag. It's a mixed report card. When you came home with both D's and A's to your mom, and she's like, "What?" So there's cause for hope and concern. The good news in math, a lot of students have made up some of the academic ground that they lost during the pandemic. The bad news in both reading and math, most fourth and eighth graders still, this is as of last year, still performed below pre-pandemic levels in 2019. What's more, while these achievement declines were exacerbated by the pandemic, they appear to have begun even before COVID, raising some questions about why students are still struggling and what, if anything, the school system can do about it. The National Assessment of Educational Progress, also known as the NAEP, which is the so-called nation's report card, is mandated by Congress. It's the biggest national test of student learning. NAEP tests were first administered back in 1969 when I was in second grade at Dorothy Lane Elementary School in Kettering, Ohio. Today, the assessments in math and reading are given every 2 years to a broad sample of students in fourth and eighth grades. In fourth, the average math score ticked up a little bit compared to 2022, ending the pandemic slide. White, Black, Hispanic, and economically disadvantaged students all showed some gains, modest gains on average. Not enough, but moving in the right direction. In fourth grade, it seems that regardless of where students were, they were improving. That, according to Lisa Ash, math consultant with the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction and a member of the NAEP governing board. That said, Fourth grade math scores are still below pre pandemic levels, with one exception. Alabama is the only state where fourth graders' average math scores were higher than 2019. In 2022, lawmakers there passed a law aimed at improving math proficiency for K to 5 students in the state. That appears to be going well. Maybe we got to find out what's in that law and replicate, cut and paste that for the other 49 states. But COVID is not the only factor to blame. A longer view of fourth graders' math scores shows those scores began stagnating and even declining before the pandemic. Math scores peaked around 2013. Multiple education researchers tell NPR they don't really know why. Interesting stuff.
Yeah. It's, I think it's weird. It really kind of reminds me of the conversation that you and Nick from the Revolutionary Blackout
Mm,
Network had about school boards. So he was kind of talking about what was going on in Missouri, and how you're kind of just talking about, well, no, education is handled at the local level by your local school board. One of the things that they started doing here, now granted, I'm in a small town, in elementary school, what they've been doing to help kids learn money and math is like an hour a week. You go through and you play Monopoly, and someone's a banker. And so you learn how to count money, and you learn how to add, you learn how to subtract. And so I think it's little things like that that you're able to do where you actually, they're able to not only think about what you're reading on a piece of paper, but actually apply them with your hands. And it just clicks for a lot of kids that way. My daughter, she really struggled with math. She hated it. She just couldn't grasp it. And so that's what we started doing with her is every week play a game of Monopoly. And she was the banker. That was her job. And that really helped her out with her basic math skills.
Um, so I want to address one of the accusations in the YouTube in the Rumble feed. Ted
Ah,
was probably getting boosters for other people at work that didn't want them. Yeah, what happened was that this is when there were the articles of talking about how tons of vaccinations were being disposed of because people didn't want them, and I was like, well, that's when I read that. I was like, okay, and this was true in New York where I lived. I was like, well, if other people don't want those boosters and they're throwing them away, I went to my CVS. I asked them, "Are you guys tossing boosters?" And they were like, "Yeah." In fact, they even had like a lottery for people who, had wanted the leftover extra boosters. I'm like, so I'm not taking anything that belonged to anyone else. It's just I was careful about that. I'm not like moral in all ways, but I was moral in that way. Just want to be clear here.
gotcha. Yeah, I missed that there on the Rumble chat.
All right. People are always like so, and also what's funny, my first COVID shot kind of did fall off the back of a truck. I couldn't, there was no way to get any shots at all in New York, like in January of 2021. And every appointment was like booked for like months ahead of time, or you just couldn't even, the website would keep crashing. So I had a friend, let's just say a very highly connected friend in the journalistic community, and who lived in New Jersey, and he was like, "So, if you could get an appointment in New Jersey, would you go?" I'm like, "Sure, I have a car, I can go." So he's like, 10 minutes later, I get this thing. Your appointment is confirmed. I'm like, what?
Huh?
so like, okay,
So,
so
so we had the opposite problem because, as people know, I work at a hospital, and we were required to take the shot.
of course,
And so, and I told him, no, I really don't want to do this. I went through, got a religious exemption, and none of it mattered. And the judgment came down from on high. It's just like, Robbie, if you do not take this shot, you will lose your job, and
right.
we will crush you. So it's
I
just,
I
so the
that's
people who
true.
say my body, my choice, uh, your hypocrisy is blatantly showing right now.
Yeah, no, I did a piece for the Wall Street Journal that you could still find if you subscribe to the Wall Street Journal behind their paywall. Back in 2021, talking about all the people, I think it was 2021, well, about all the people who were getting fired due to the vaccine mandate from the healthcare profession in particular. I
Yep.
talked to people who'd been in the field for 15, 20 or more years who were losing their jobs. And what was really frustrating was this was around the time of Omicron. So at first, early on, there was a belief during the alpha and beta waves of the virus that the vaccine would prevent spread. And and as of Omicron and now, it does not, right? It does not prevent you from transmitting it. It does prevent your your symptoms from getting worse, and it might save your life. And it might make the difference between life and death if you do get it. So it's not like it has no worth. It has plenty of worth. But the point is that like the knowledge, the science had changed. Like a lot of people were saying, follow the science. Well, they weren't following the science back then.
Yeah. Like the endocrinologist, the main endocrinologist here at the hospital, he was actually arguing against it, said this is stupid because you're doing this completely in an unscientific way. So what you want to do is actually make people more sick than if you just uh, if you did not do this. And because it was a federal mandate, it did not matter. It was just you will take the shot or you will lose your job.
Yeah, it's bad. All right, last and not least, because we're then going to move on to this crazy announcement from Donald Trump. An opinion poll indicates that 85% of the people who live in Greenland do not want to become part of the U.S. Nearly half say that they see Trump's interest not as an opportunity, but as a threat. Trump said earlier this month, of course, that Greenland is vital to U.S. security, and Denmark should therefore give up control of the strategically important island. In fact, he even called the Danish prime minister and pissed him off about this and said, "Give me Greenland, damn you." The survey by a pollster called Varian, commissioned by the Danish newspaper Berlingske and the Greenlandic daily newspaper Sermitsiak, showed that only 6% of Greenlanders want to become part of the US, 9% are undecided. 45% of Greenlanders say that Trump's interest in Greenland is a threat. 43% say they see it as an opportunity. 13% say they kind of don't know. Greenland enjoys many of the same welfare benefits as Denmark, of course, because, it's part of Denmark, like universal health care and free education. I have an idea. Why don't we have Denmark and Greenland invade the United States and give us universal health care?
No, what's going on here, Ted, is that Greenland needs a good dose of democracy. I mean, they clearly know they're living under an authoritarian regime. They're being dominated by the European Union, and yeah, exactly. I mean, they're being ruled by a monarch, and
a Christian kingdom, though.
Well, I mean, so is Yugoslavia. Look what we did there. So I mean, just because you're a Christian nation does not matter. I mean, they will still destroy you. Ask the Serbs. They'll let you know.
So only 8% of Greenlanders say that they're willing to become American citizens. 55% say they want to remain Danish citizens. 37% are undecided. So, I mean, look, with consent, I mean, kidding aside, I mean, Greenlanders obviously aren't that into us. Do you think there's anything that Trump or the United States could do to, seduce them? Like, hey, we're going to send you a big foam core check for $1 million each to every one of the 60,000 or so people who live there. You're going to be rolling in wealth, but you're going to be our vassal state.
I think what Trump will do is that he'll go the other way and he'll just let Denmark know, hey, if you want to continue being defended by the United States military, then you will give us what we want, or we will no longer protect you. I think
if I were Denmark, I'd be like, bye.
Well, of course.
Who's attacking Denmark? I mean, they're part of NATO. They can count on all the other NATO members to come to their rescue. I mean, the Russians are coming after Denmark? Nobody's coming after Denmark. I mean, they just aren't.
The Russians are everywhere. The Russians are everywhere. And true. I mean, now granted, listen, I'm in favor of getting out of NATO, pulling out of Europe, letting Europe actually be.
Well, NATO
European.
Shouldn't exist. I'd go 100%. Further. I think NATO should be disbanded. It should have been disbanded at the end of the war, of the Cold War.
Yeah, well, what's the point of it? But I think though I can see how Trump, what he will do is like if you want NATO to continue to exist and you want to continue being under the American nuclear umbrella, then you will do as I say, or you're going to have to pick between funding military or funding your socialist utopia. You can't do both. You're not the world reserve currency. Debt is a thing, and you will pick now. Which one's more important to you?
Agreed. Totally. All right. So, and that's basically it that's not basically it. That is it for our news headlines.
Is that record time for getting through headlines, even with the technical glitch?
Pretty close. Yeah. We're We are making improvements here, very slowly, but yes. I think that's, although we have gotten out around this time before. The real test, and I need to get out of my Airbnb in 25 minutes. So the real test is this subject. So we're going to go right into it. Imagine
Do it.
that Jaws had just occurred. Okay, and here we go, and away we go. All right, so Jaws Creek. Okay, bearing the same subject line as a downsizing memo sent to Twitter employees by Elon Musk, an ominous mass email was fired out yesterday by the Trump administration to millions of federal government employees. They've been offered a buyout if they voluntarily agree to resign within a week by January 6th. There's a fist inside the velvet glove because this is America. Most federal agencies will probably be slashed, and a substantial number of employees will be furloughed or reclassified to at-will status, making them easier to fire. A lot of remote workers will have to go back to the office, which they don't want, presumably. And many who would be willing to go back will find that their offices have been moved, to another state where, they don't live. We will discuss. So let's discuss whether Trump has the power to pay those buyouts out. That's an interesting question. The possibility of court battles, the pros and cons of remote work, and whether this disrespectful treatment of government employees is fair. I don't know. I was going to say equitable, but that's not really pertinent. But everyone's supposed to be equitable these days. Anyway, let's get into it. What's your? I'm not gonna, to say what I think yet. What do you think, Robbie? I mean, I know you had some thoughts about this early in the show. I don't know if any of them got out though.
I don't think so. I mean, what my thought is, one thing that Trump is offering to do a buyout, I think that's the right thing to do. I don't think he has the power to do it. I think that what is in his purview as the executive is that he could just issue a mass layoff and then just fire them. The fact that he's actually trying to, offer them some kind of a severance package, say, hey, this is what's going to happen. These cuts are coming. I want you to be able to keep getting a paycheck. I mean, is it in his power to do? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. Is it the right thing to do? Yeah, I think so, especially if it's going to happen. And one of the things before the show started, when we were talking about this, I told Ted, it's like, oh, so Trump's sending him a Dear John letter. And Ted's just like, well, no, that's between a boyfriend and a girlfriend. I said, no, back home, that also applies to employers.
Oh,
They
is
can
that
write
true?
you a Dear John letter. 100%. America's just really big. And so you have these little cultural nuances
Oh,
like
yeah.
Coke and Pop and Pepsi.
Oh, what do you call a traffic circle in Montana if you have them?
A pain in the ass.
Do you have them?
We've got one outside of town.
So, in Massachusetts, they're called rotaries. In Long Island, they're called a traffic circle. There's lots of different names for them. Oh, a roundabout is one of the names.
Yeah, I've heard people call them donuts or pains in the butt.
Never heard donut.
Yeah, I don't know, but there's not very many. We have this little alternate road called Alternate 93, which bypasses Kalispell where I am and lets you go north of town. So we have to go through downtown Kalispell to get where you're trying to go. And there's a couple of those little donuts there, but for the most part, it's just straight lines.
Let me just say that once people learn how to use them, which is the huge thing, they're better. I used to work in the traffic engineering department of a town in Ohio. It's like you're supposed to what people do, unfortunately, is they don't know how to use them. They stop and they kind of like wait for traffic to clear. And like, no, you're supposed to just sort of swoop in, not like if there's tons of cars, but basically if there's just one or two cars, you're supposed to swoop in, don't even stop, just glide through. But people don't know how to use it. They're like, it's circular, it's not angular, I don't know what to do.
Well, I'll tell you what,
get scared.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you come here to come visit, I will 100% take you to the traffic donut and let you see it marvel in its engineering beauty.
There was one of those in the Hamptons where I used to live. Well, there were a few of them, and they just basically caused traffic backups. And there was one close to my house where it was so poorly engineered that people kept having accidents and hitting the rim, their cars on the side of the curb, because the curb wasn't shaped in the way that people drive.
Well, here what happens, a lot of people have trucks. And so if you don't weight down the bed of the truck with sandbags on your axles, what happens is that you'll fishtail. And so a lot of people, like the bed of their trucks will smack against the donut.
Oh,
And
that's not good.
no, so people have learned if you're going to use this, you got to put a couple 100 pounds of sand in the bed of your truck, or an elk or something, so that way you don't fishtail.
Not a live one though.
Either
Uh,
one,
by the
either
way,
way works.
important detail about this buyout thing. So I've never been, offered a buyout. I've been fired a bunch
Yep.
of times from jobs, and in some cases they gave me a modest severance package. Mostly not. Mostly it was just like bye. But I have tons and tons of friends in journalism who've gone through this process of getting the buyout, right? And it's quite the conundrum, because you're like, okay, so you have a week to literally think, okay, should I take this? And then you could potentially be paid out until September, but potentially quit, like, as of next week, effectively getting a 7 months of free salary, or up to 7 months, which is pretty appealing. Let's say you thought you could get another job
I
before
would do it.
then. You're effectively like thinking, or a job that pays about as well, or even better. If you've been planning to make a move, this is like a godsend. But if you're not, then you've got to think to yourself, okay, well, if this, if what if they eliminate my department, right? Like, what do
Sure.
I do then? And it's like, what if they make me at will and they decide to make me part of the budget cut, and I could have at least gotten money before I lost my job. So, and not to mention also, the longer you wait, you'll be competing against other federal workers in your department who all lose their jobs at the same time, looking for new jobs. Nobody knows what's happening in the economy in later this year, or what Trump's going to do. On the other hand, Trump might not have the authority to do this. A lot of this is going to be tied up in court. There's federal worker unions who are going to go to court and fight this tooth and nail. And then this is the part I really want to get your thoughts on, but all of it is fine. Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, who was, of course, Hillary Clinton's running mate in 2016, he said something that is pretty important. If you accept that offer and resign, he'll stiff you, he said. He doesn't have any authority to do it, because there was never any. There's no line item in the budget for the buyout to come from. So if you take the buyout, Congress hasn't appropriated any funds to pay you your buyout. So how do you get the buyout? So you quit, and then you're just like, you got no money. So that's kind of a big consideration.
And that's just the thing that's really weird, right? Because, like, with my job, the hospital I work for, they're merging with another hospital chain, and so there's a lot of layoffs that are coming. We know this. We don't know who's going to get laid off. We know it's not going to be nurses. We know it's not going to be doctors. We know it's all going to be the support staff, like records. It's going to be IT. Basically all the support people. So we know that this iceberg is coming. None of us know which which ship is it going to hit, though. Me personally, if my job offered some kind of a package like this, I would be all over it like white on rice. But here's the difference, though. I'm working for a corporation, not the federal government, that hasn't appropriated the funds. And so, to me, it seems like if Trump is making this offer, then legally he would have to make good on it, because he is telling them in writing, you will be paid out until September. So, I mean,
Well,
maybe he's
yeah,
thinking
but
that
that
he
would
could
only
just.
be enforceable in court. So you're right. I mean, obviously, that email that you received as a federal employee. Let's say you avail yourself and you decide to act on it, but how do you enforce it? You have
Well,
to
the money's
sue
already.
the federal government,
Well, the
and
money's
you're
already.
not going to win, because the federal government has set up the legal system so that when you sue the federal government, you can't win, basically.
Oh, 100%. But the budget, though, was signed off while Sleepy Uncle Joe was still president. So
The
that
budget,
money is already there.
no, the money is there, not the money, because you know how federal spending is all about which pot it's in. So ironically, you
Then
can't
Elon
even.
could spot him. He can afford it.
Pardon?
Elon could spot him. Then he can afford it.
He could, but he won't. So no, I mean, I think that's this only works if Congress makes an emergency appropriation of funds to finance this offer. Otherwise, no one's going to. Well, no one smart's going to take it. Let's put it that way.
No, I mean, if I was Trump, if I was kind of going back where Mandela had her first vacation, if President West was a thing, uh, I would have just fired them. I would just said, I appreciate your time. Your service is no longer needed. Have a nice life. Best of luck to you."
Well,
Because I think that you're right. I don't see where Trump has the power to pay them. He can fire them, but he
Well,
can't
not he
pay them.
can't fire all of them because a lot of them they're civil service employees and they have contracts and they have to be fired for cause. They can't just be they're not at will. And so the idea is that they're going to transition them to at will employees. I'm not even sure they can do that. I mean, it's this is kind of analogous to when a teacher has tenure. A tenured teacher can't be fired unless they do something very extreme, and then they have to go through a whole tenure termination process that's it's far more lengthy and hard to accomplish for the school district than the normal at will employee.
Gotcha. So then, could Trump just simply not pay them?
No, well, again, he he could not pay them. I know he'd be like he could treat them like one of the Polish illegal migrants who
Yeah.
built Trump Tower. But I mean, it would be then who would ever who would ever be willing to work for the federal government again? And I do want to think about like a major implication here. So unemployment. I mean, Donald Trump won primarily because of the economy, right? Well, if you create massive unemployment, that's not going to be popular. And the federal government, like it or not, employs millions of people.
Yep.
Those millions of people, I don't want them competing against me when I go out looking for a job. And so, I mean, and I think I'm not alone in feeling that way. So I don't even think it's a Democrat versus Republican thing. I mean, I think that it's like, look, I admire Donald Trump's scale of ambition, even though I don't agree with everything he's trying to do, or most of what he's trying to do. But I do admire an ambitious president who has a big agenda. This is a
Right.
big agenda, but this doesn't feel thought through. This feels half baked.
No, this feels like Elon Musk and Twitter because whenever he went in, he just chopped the three quarters of the workforce.
Well, he
I think
did it
that's what this
exactly the
is.
same way, a
Of
fork in the
course.
road. Yeah.
And so, when we first talked about this morning, I was going through and I was looking at civil service laws, and they definitely do protect people from individual firings because then you can say, well, this is political retaliation. I didn't find anything at all that protects against mass layoffs. It's like the way that I would do this personally, if I was the president, everyone has a social security number that works for the federal government. So what I would do is just say, if your social security number ends with the number two, you're gone. That way it's just completely
I don't know
random.
if you remember this. This would be like gas rationing in the 1970s.
That was
That's how they
before
used
my
to do
time.
with they used to do based on your license plate. It was like if your license plate is odd, then you can get gas today. If it's even, you get gas tomorrow.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I would do this, then to your point, yeah, I mean, is it going to create competition in the workplace? Sure. But one of the things that we keep hearing about is one of the reasons why we need to have migrants coming in, H-1B, whatever else, is because there's not enough Americans to work. Well, you have millions of people working for the federal government who suddenly are now available for the workforce. I think that that's a net positive
So
because
someone in the
then
Rumble room said, "Just move people from you." This is Mr. Ali. Just move people from useless departments to useful ones like immigration. I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea, right? I mean, and also I don't like the fact that the military is exempt from all this. I mean,
no,
there's more bloat in the military than any other major department. It's by far the biggest spending sector of spending in the federal government, and we really could get rid of 95% of all military spending tomorrow and be at least as safe as we are today. I mean, but I'm not saying that all those soldiers and all those those other staffers should be unemployed.
the
We've
lobbyists would
got
never allow it.
trains to build. We've got hospitals to renovate. We've got schools to build. We've got stuff to do.
Sure.
I mean, it's like it's not like this country, is in good shape. The
No,
infrastructure sucks. Like it's I wouldn't let all those people go.
I mean, the way that I would, one thing, I mean, the lobbyists are never going to let there be any kind of cut to military spending. It's too much money. No, you got to keep making the tanks and the missiles so that way you can just keep genociding people around the world. And you always got to find a country, look at you, Greenland, that needs a nice dose of democracy. I mean, it just happens. So
Hmm.
now, what, no, being in that situation, what I would do is I would lay off a lot of the civil service people. I just get rid of them. They can go work in the private sector. And then I think the
Driving
question
up
I have is,
unemployment, though. You didn't address my point. Unemployment's a problem. I mean,
well,
this is a
well,
lot of people. If you fired even 1 million federal workers, the national unemployment rate's going to go up dramatically.
yeah, but the thing is that we keep hearing all the time that there is a labor shortage here in this country, and
Well,
that's why we keep having immigrants coming in. So
well,
what my
that's there's
so
no
the point,
labor. There is not really a labor shortage.
of course, there's not, but that's what they say.
People
So I
have
mean,
a really hard time finding jobs. I mean, what's going on is like, so basically we have what they call a mismatch, right? It's like there's tons of job listings where employers they claim they're looking for work,
they're not.
but everybody they're kind of like the fussy hot girl
Yeah,
who's like, like no one will go out with me, and you're like, I'll go out with you, and she's like, no, not you. And
yeah,
she just keeps doing that, right? And then
nope,
she stays home on prom night because no one's good enough. That's what these employees are like. I
sure.
mean, employers are like, they don't want to train anyone. They don't want to retrain their existing employees. They want people to land fully formed in their positions, in knowing everything about the job, and like no need to do anything. Work for
So
60% of average pay. I mean, they're assholes.
of course they are, but I'm going to show my ignorance, and I'm going to submit myself to your greater experience and skill. And I'm just going to ask you, like, do most, at least like your clerical staff in the federal government, are most of them college graduates? So do they have some kind of a degree or something, or a VA benefit or something?
Yeah, and they kind of don't. A lot of them probably, like in all sectors, do not need a college degree to do the job. I mean, most
Right. Well,
people, the vast majority of people who have a college degree don't use it. I'm one of them.
sure. But
It's like,
here's
yeah,
here's what I'm going at with this. Like, as you know, I've been looking for video editing gigs all over the country,
hmm
working remotely. Most of them, they want a bachelor's degree or higher. I don't know what the hell a bachelor's degree
it's
is, but it sounds
stupid.
expensive. Very much so. So I can't get that job. But yet you have thousands and thousands of federal employees that have these degrees. They can be weaned off the government tit, go work for these companies because they do have these degrees. Because
hmm
I'm not going to get the job anyway. At least that way, then they're no longer getting a government salary and they're paying taxes to help reduce the debt.
Well, I mean,
So that's my point of view.
the thing is, I don't know if I really like the whole just like, we're just reducing the workforce. I mean, it's like, okay, that's a blunt instrument. I mean, to me, that's not what, like, the Doge was sold as like, you're going to have two brilliant billionaires. Okay, make that one brilliant billionaire who's
There's a
going to,
joke.
like, roll up their sleeves and look under the hood of the federal government and figure out what is working well, what's not working well, and like make it, more efficient, as Doge,
Sure.
as the E in Doge means. And they didn't, and that's not what's happening here. This is like your standard corporate cost cutting. We're just trying to get to lower numbers. We don't care if I mean, look, I don't, if I were a supervisor in the federal government, I would hate this. I mean, there are employees who I wouldn't want to offer a buyout because they're my best employees. Then
Sure.
there's others who I'd be dying to get rid of because they sucked, but maybe they don't take the buyout because and those people probably won't take the buyout because they're the people who would be least likely to be entrepreneurial or able to find a new job. I mean, so this, there's a sense that you're going to be gutting some essential services. This is going to have the law of unintended consequences is like completely like in full effect with something like this. Although frankly, I don't think anyone's going to take it, to tell you the truth. I mean, because of the lack of appropriations, because of Senator Kane's remark, I think everyone's just going to sit on their hands and be like, wait and see.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? And one of the things I've always wondered about, and I actually want to ask you about this because I've been reading your new book, is do you think that federal employees should have unions? I mean, if you
I think
work for the government,
every person who works for a living should be entitled to join a union, and be able to withhold their labor in the event that and bargain collectively, for the simple reason employers, they get to bargain collectively. They conspire to set prices for employees. They have anti-poaching laws, agreements with each other, like where Apple says, oh, we won't hire anyone from X or vice versa. This is a so I think, yeah, I think federal workers should be able to join, to have unions. The most toxic unions maybe they've earned maybe the right to never exist is police unions. They probably shouldn't exist just because there's such a foul influence on the system. But we haven't seen anything that bad with federal workers and unions. But I don't feel very strongly about it. But I don't see why federal workers should not be allowed to unionize. There's never been a strong argument made in favor of that.
Gotcha. Because the reason that I even started thinking about this is yesterday when you're talking to Caleb about that taxi driver in Moscow who wouldn't drive you around.
Yeah.
Let's just assume, for example, that dude, instead of being a taxi driver, was a school teacher.
Mm.
Then you couldn't fire him because he's protected by a union. And so
Yeah,
I
you couldn't fire that guy because he was Soviet. Yeah.
So I just wonder, like how in the story earlier, how you're talking about math and reading skills around the country are just, well, frankly, they suck. Um, is that because you just can't fire bad teachers because they're protected by a union? So that's
Well,
what I'm looking at.
that's the brief that some people are saying. And look, I'm not saying that doesn't happen ever. I mean, of course that happens sometimes. And ironically, some of the best teachers are not tenured, and they do get fired really easily. Sometimes the more challenging ones who, maybe are hard on their students and demanding more, and then the parents complain
Yeah,
to the administration. They're the best teachers, and they get canned. So that can happen for sure.
we see
But
it
I
all the
like
time.
I like tenure overall, even though it's going to protect some people who aren't that great. Workers don't have enough protections in this country. It's way too easy to hire to fire you. It's way too easy to cut your pay. There's not an even playing field between labor and management, and for that reason alone, I think anything that strengthens workers at this stage, I think is valuable.
Yeah, and one of the things the in my sector, one of the things that, and this is going to kind of come as a little bit of a shock to my brethren on the right, especially being a Southerner. Uh, I'm actually pro union because I see just how workers are abused in the sector of the economy that I work in. I mean, it's terrible. It really sucks. And kind of going back to the whole Trump thing, um, I don't see how he has the ability to offer a Dear John letter with a golden parachute. I think he would have just been better off saying, okay, in 6 weeks you're out of a job. Here's your notice. Go with God, inshallah, as you say.
Inshallah. All right. Well, inshallah is, I think, we're a good place to end any conversation. And we're going to make it this one. I have to get, as I previously mentioned, I have a hard out here at 11 o'clock Eastern. So I've got to go. Robbie, thank you so much for
Yep.
sitting in here for Manila. Manila, please get better. Everybody, thank you for listening and thank you for joining us. So thank you also for moderating the chat as always, Robbie. I don't know if you had as much chance to moderate as usual. Please, please, please subscribe. We're very close to that 500 that we need on YouTube. Please subscribe also on Rumble, and if you can become a paid subscriber at any level on Rumble, we really appreciate that. So it's, just to be clear here, we used to all pay for this kind of content a lot more. We used to pay for newspapers, magazines, hundreds of dollars a month. You're not doing that anymore. You're getting a lot of content for free. But if you like it, you got to pay for it. So otherwise, it's going to go away and it won't be viable, and we won't be able to justify it. I mean, things have been building along nicely. Let's keep that going. It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe. So if you haven't done so, please do so. If you have done so, thank you so much. And with that, we are gonna go. I just want to make sure I find our little outro. All right. Thank you, everybody, and bye.